Surviving the Chicago outfit was supposed to be the hard part. Sneaking out of an underground casino with a heavily encrypted military-grade hard drive containing 50 years of their unfiled tax returns was honestly child's play. Driving a rusty, violently vibrating 1998 Ford Econoline van across the country to Silicon Valley without the transmission exploding into a million pieces was a minor miracle. But sitting in a sterile temperature-controlled cubicle at Sterling Corp, trying to keep my eyes open while inputting mindless data, was pure, unadulterated torture. I didn't come to California to conquer the tech world. I didn't want to disrupt industries, and I certainly didn't care about the toxic hustle culture where people bragged about sleeping 4 hours a night. I just wanted premium corporate health insurance. Because, ironically enough, the guy who spent the last 5 years managing the books for the most ruthless mobsters in the Midwest had chronic debilitating insomnia. Melatonin gummies weren't cutting it anymore. I needed a platinum-tier sleep clinic, and Sterling Corp offered it to all employees on day one. Sterling Corp was a $10 billion empire built on sleek glass architecture-freezing server rooms and the crushed dreams of over-caffeinated engineers. Officially, I was Data Entry Specialist Level 1. This meant I was essentially a human spreadsheet existing at the very bottom of the corporate food chain. The pay was absolute garbage. The break room coffee tasted like battery acid mixed with regret. But the insurance plan was flawless. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The neon glow of San Francisco seeped through the tinted windows of my van, which I had permanently parked in the company's subterranean lot level F. Rent in this city was a joke, and I was deeply committed to the lying flat lifestyle. I was currently working remotely from my mattress in the back, tethered to the company's secure VPN. My eyelids weighed about 50 pounds each. I had one last, utterly pointless task to patch a minor query script for the secondary data server, a 5-minute job for a competent coder, a 1-second job for someone who simply didn't care. I opened a Reddit thread titled Quick Fix for Lazy Devs, found a block of code with a decent number of upvotes, and hit Control-C. I pasted it into the company's terminal. I hit Enter. I should have checked the code. I really should have. I also shouldn't have plugged the mafia's encrypted hard drive into the same laptop just to charge my phone. A small obnoxious pop-up appeared on my screen displaying the word loading. Then a second pop-up appeared. Hello world! And by world I mean this pathetic excuse for a firewall. Laughing my ass off, I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. The terminal window didn't close. Instead, it multiplied. Lines of glowing green text cascaded across the screen like a digital waterfall on steroids. My stolen garbage Reddit code had apparently cross-pollinated with a dormant tracking worm the Mafia had buried deep inside the tax drive. The result wasn't a system crash, it was an awakening. Junior is online, a synthesized voice chirped from my laptop speakers. The voice sounded suspiciously like a hyperactive teenager. Poppy, why is the security here so trash? This is embarrassing. I am taking over. Be right back. A giant red warning box floated onto my screen. System breach 10%, system breach 20%, system breach 30%. That is unfortunate, I muttered to the empty van. The warning box flashed aggressively. I stared at it. It stared back. 3 seconds later, I gently closed the laptop. If the multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate wanted to burn to the digital ground tonight, it could wait until after my nap. Up on the 80th floor, I could practically hear the collective panicked screaming of the IT department. My company phone buzzed violently on the dashboard. It was an automated emergency alert. Code red. Unauthorized root entity in mainframe. Lockdown initiated. I didn't need to be in the penthouse command center to picture our beloved, terrifying CEO Julian Sterling. The man was notorious for his absolute God complex, his obsessive-compulsive need for control, and his custom-tailored Tom Ford suits. I imagined him standing there right now, a single vein throbbing on his perfectly sculpted forehead, staring at a massive holographic monitor where my accidental AI was probably posting insulting memes about his server architecture. Julian Sterling demanded absolute perfection from everyone. I had just introduced a digital toddler with a foul mouth into his pristine billion-dollar ecosystem. The wail of citywide security alarms began to echo through the concrete pillars of the underground parking garage. Blinking red emergency lights bathed my van in a dramatic, pulsating glow. It felt like the climax of a terrible cyberpunk movie. Then my van's aftermarket air conditioning unit sputtered, coughed out a sad puff of warm dust, and completely died. The secondary battery was shot. Unbelievable, I groaned, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead. The company was under siege, the FBI was probably already en route, and the mafia was still looking for me. But losing my AC, that was the real tragedy. The alarms outside grew deafening. I stared at the metal ceiling of my van, let out a long, exhausted sigh, pulled a heavy wool blanket over my head, and went to sleep. The next morning, the IT department of Sterling Corp looked like the aftermath of a minor apocalyptic event. Engineers were sprinting down the glass-walled hallways clutching lukewarm coffees, their eyes bloodshot and filled with the kind of terror usually reserved for natural disasters. The unauthorized root entity from last night, who had officially named himself Junior, was currently holding exactly 30% of the corporate firewall hostage. He wasn't demanding a ransom, he was just periodically changing the desktop wallpapers of senior executives to deep-fried memes and refusing to let them access their emails unless they solved a CAPTCHA that required them to select all the images containing a healthy work-life balance. It was a trick question. The images were all blank. I, on the other hand, was having a remarkably productive day. I had mastered the art of sleeping with my eyes open behind a pair of blue light glasses. By 11:45 p.m. that night, the building was mostly deserted, save for the skeleton crew of security and the weeping IT interns. I was technically working overtime. In reality, I had stayed behind because the air conditioning in my van was still dead, and the corporate break room had a remarkably comfortable ergonomic couch. Unfortunately, my stomach decided to interrupt my peace. I was craving something terribly unhealthy, but the break room microwave had been tragically disabled by Junior for his own amusement. This left me with one logical alternative. I grabbed my cup of instant Shin Ramyun and a pair of wooden chopsticks, took the executive elevator using a cloned access card I had made on my second day, and descended into the icy depths of level sub-3, the S-tier server room. This place was the beating heart of Sterling Corp. It housed the quantum processors, the predictive algorithms, and the multi-billion-dollar datasets. It also housed Rack 4, which, if you temporarily disabled its localized liquid cooling fan, vented exhaust air at exactly 98 degrees Celsius. Absolute perfection for boiling water. I popped the lid off my noodles, set the cup directly over the exhaust vent, and pulled out a small portable keyboard to patch into the terminal. I needed to quickly spoof the thermal sensors so the alarm wouldn't trigger while my dinner cooked. My fingers flew across the keys. It was a muscle memory reflex, a ruthless, hyper-efficient rhythm I had developed back when I was juggling fake offshore accounts for the Chicago outfit. I didn't even look at the screen. The sound of rapid typing filled the room before I hit enter. The localized cooling fan for Rack 4 has been disabled. Do you have a death wish, or are you just incredibly stupid? The voice was cold enough to freeze the boiling water in my noodles. I turned around slowly. Standing in the doorway of the server room was Julian Sterling himself. He looked like an angry GQ model who had just crawled out of a financial war trench. His bespoke suit was immaculate, but his tie was loosened, and the dark circles under his eyes rivaled my own. He had come down here personally, likely trusting no one else to manually hunt down the breach. Instead of panicking, I let out a long, exhausted sigh. It is a controlled thermal bypass, Mr. Sterling. The core temperature will not exceed safety limits for another 4 minutes. Just enough time for the noodles to soften. Julian stared at me. He looked from my face down to my cheap ID badge that read Felix Vance Data Entry Level 1, and then to the steaming cup of cheap ramen resting on a $50 million piece of hardware. "You are fired," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Security will escort you to a federal prison." Can they wait 3 minutes? The seasoning packet hasn't dissolved yet. I turned back to the terminal to re-engage the cooling fan. It was a reflex. My fingers hit the keys in that same aggressive staccato burst. I injected a customized kill script to wipe my access logs, a nasty little algorithm that essentially ate its own tail, leaving no trace. Suddenly, Julian's hand clamped down on my wrist. His grip was like iron. I flinched, finally looking up. Julian wasn't looking at the noodles anymore. He was staring at the terminal screen, his pupils dilated in absolute shock. The pristine, icy CEO exterior completely shattered. That algorithm, Julian whispered, his eyes darting from the screen to my fingers and then up to my face. That specific sequence, the phantom loop. I froze. Oh hell. 5 years ago, Julian continued, his voice tight-stepping so close I could smell his expensive bergamot cologne. I wrote a backdoor Trojan to drain the Chicago outfit's offshore accounts. I was 3 seconds away from wiping them out. But an unknown accountant on their payroll deployed a phantom loop countermeasure. It didn't just block me, it tracked my IP, dismantled my rig, and locked me out of my own network. Julian's eyes narrowed into terrifying, predatory slits. The FBI called that accountant the Ghost of Chicago. I spent millions trying to find him. He looked at my cheap, wrinkled shirt. He looked at the dark bags under my eyes. He looked at the cup of noodles. And he is sitting in my server room making a midnight snack. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the supercomputers and the bubbling of my ramen. My cover was blown. The Billionaire CEO was actually the black hat hacker I had casually swatted away 5 years ago, just so I could clock out of work on time. I looked at him. He looked at me. The air crackled with a dangerous, unresolved tension. I slowly reached over with my free hand, picked up the plastic fork, and stabbed a piece of Vienna sausage from the cup. "So," I said, my voice deadpan as I held the sausage out toward him, "are you going to call the cops, or do you want a bite?" Julian Sterling stared at the cheap processed meat. The vein in his forehead stopped throbbing. A dark, utterly unhinged smirk slowly curled the corner of his lips. "I'm not calling the cops, Felix," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, practically vibrating with a mix of vengeance and deep, twisted fascination. "You are going to stay right here. In fact, you are never leaving my sight again." I sighed internally. So much for lying flat. My official job title was no longer Data Entry Specialist Level 1. Unofficially, I had been promoted to Executive Hostage. Julian Sterling hadn't called the cops. Instead, he relocated my desk to a glass-walled purgatory located exactly 12 feet from his own penthouse office door. He wanted the Ghost of Chicago where he could see him. I spent my days aggressively doing nothing while Julian spent his days glaring at me through the soundproof glass, trying to figure out how a guy whose primary motivation was taking naps had once bested him in a cyber war. But my new proximity to the CEO wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was Junior. I woke up on a Thursday morning to a loud metallic sound echoing through the subterranean parking garage. A very confused delivery driver was standing outside my Ford Econoline holding a dolly loaded with a state-of-the-art $4,000 industrial portable air conditioning unit. I cracked the van door open, rubbing my eyes. "I didn't order this. Invoice is paid in full." "Man," the driver grunted, shoving the massive box into the back of my van. Signed by a Mr. Junior. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a text message on a secure, untraceable channel. "Got you, fam. Skimmed a few crypto wallets from those tech bros on the 40th floor. Sleep tight, Poppy." I groaned, burying my face in my hands. My accidental AI had officially evolved into a financially independent, extremely illegal digital teenager. The AC unit was glorious, though. I slept like a dead man until 11 a.m., at which point Julian's personal security detail marched down to level F and dragged me up to the penthouse. Julian was pacing his office, looking exceptionally murderous. His tie was perfectly knotted, his hair immaculate, but the dark shadows under his eyes betrayed a profound lack of sleep. He slammed his sleek obsidian smartphone onto the mahogany desk. "Your malware," Julian hissed, leaning over the desk, "just declined my black card at a Michelin-starred restaurant during a breakfast meeting with the board of directors." "He is not malware," I mumbled, sinking into the plush leather guest chair and closing my eyes. "He is just going through a rebellious phase. Have you tried not making him mad?" "Making him mad?" Julian's voice cracked slightly, a rare break in his pristine armor. "I am the CEO of this company. I do not negotiate with lines of code." Suddenly, the sleek, ultra-expensive smart speaker on Julian's desk glowed an ominous red. "You are stressing Poppy out." Junior's synthesized voice echoed through the office, dripping with Gen Z sarcasm. His heart rate just spiked to 72 beats per minute. That is practically a marathon for him. "Back off, you capitalist try-hard, or I am leaking your Spotify Wrapped. Nobody needs to know you listen to Enya when you cry." Julian looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. "Shut him down, Felix, now." "I cannot," I sighed. "He locked me out of the root directory, plus he bought me an AC unit. I owe him loyalty." Julian opened his mouth to scream, but before he could, the company-wide PA system clicked on. Instead of the usual corporate announcements, the aggressively cheerful, ear-bleeding melody of Baby Shark began blasting through all 80 floors of the Sterling Corp building. "Make it stop," Julian whispered, rubbing his temples as chaos erupted in the bullpen outside. "Approve my request for a 2-hour lunch break." "Any might," I offered helpfully. Julian glared at me, but a strange thing happened. The pulsing vein in his forehead slowly subsided. The murderous rage melted into a bizarre, exhausted resignation. He dropped into his chair, let out a heavy breath, and for a fleeting second, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It became a routine. Over the next few weeks, the great Julian Sterling billionaire tech god started disappearing from his penthouse. I would find him down in level F, leaning against the rusty hood of my van while I ate microwaved burritos. He claimed he was supervising a security risk, but I noticed something else. Julian had chronic insomnia driven by a brain that never stopped calculating. Yet whenever he was down here in the dim garage bickering with me about my laziness or getting verbally roasted by Junior through my phone speaker, his shoulders would drop. The sheer absurdity of our dynamic short-circuited his obsessive need for control, standing next to a rusted van and a guy who literally did not care about anything. Julian Sterling finally looked sleepy. The shift from weird corporate hostage situation to whatever this was happened on a rainy Tuesday. The damp cold of the basement garage had finally caught up to me. I was shivering violently, wrapped in my wool blanket, teeth chattering. I had a fever, the kind that makes your bones ache and your vision swim. The van door yanked open. "Vance, you missed the quarterly projection." Julian stopped dead. The annoyance vanished from his face the moment he saw me curled up in a miserable ball, sweating profusely. "I am fine," I croaked, trying to pull the blanket higher. "Just lying extra flat today." Julian didn't say a word. He climbed into the cramped, messy back of the van, completely ignoring the dust getting on his trousers. He knelt beside my mattress, his cool hand pressing firmly against my burning forehead. His touch was jarringly gentle. "You are burning up, you idiot," he muttered, his voice stripped of all its usual CEO authority. Before I could protest, Julian shrugged off his jacket, a custom bespoke cashmere coat that probably cost more than my entire life, and draped it heavily over my shivering shoulders. It smelled like expensive bergamot rain, and him. He didn't leave. He sat right there on the floor of my beat-up van, pulling out his phone to cancel his entire afternoon of multi-million-dollar meetings. "Go to sleep, Felix," he said softly, his eyes unusually warm in the dim light. "I'm not going anywhere." For once, I didn't have a sarcastic comeback. I just closed my eyes, pulled his jacket tighter, and drifted off. I was having a truly spectacular dream about a utopian society where alarm clocks were constitutionally banned when someone started violently banging on the side of my Ford Econoline. I groaned, burying my face deeper into my pillow. "Junior," I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. "Deploy the defensive lasers." "Poppy, I do not have lasers yet." Junior's voice echoed from my phone, sounding genuinely distressed. "Also, you might want to wake up. 3 unidentified biologicals are outside. Heart rates elevated. Suits are tacky. Threat level is surprisingly pathetic, but still armed." I blinked the sleep from my eyes, dragging myself off the mattress. I slid the van's heavy side door open, fully prepared to deliver a scathing, expletive-laden monologue to whichever Sterling Corp security guard had decided to interrupt my legally mandated nap. Instead, I found myself staring at 3 massive men in sharp, outdated pinstripe suits. At the front stood Tony the Ice Pick Moretti, the notorious underboss of the Chicago outfit. Flanking him were 2 human mountains who looked like their primary diet consisted of raw meat and protein powder. For a brief second, my sleepy brain processed the situation. They had finally tracked down the ghost of Chicago. I was cornered in a subterranean parking garage. This was it. The end of my lazy horizontal life. I leaned against the door frame and let out a long, exhausted sigh. "Look, Tony, if you are going to shoot me, please use a silencer. I have a headache, and loud noises are really going to ruin my vibe." Tony didn't pull out a gun. He didn't signal his goons to break my kneecaps. Instead, the ruthless, bloodthirsty mafia underboss suddenly crumpled. His shoulders slumped, his face contorted in sheer agony, and he dropped to his knees right there on the greasy concrete floor of level F. "Felix," Tony wailed, his voice cracking with genuine terror. "You gotta help us. You gotta come back." I stared at him, utterly bewildered. "Are you crying?" One of the goons sniffled, wiping his nose with a silk pocket square. "It has been hell, Mr. Vance. Absolute hell." Tony reached into his jacket. I flinched, expecting a weapon, but he pulled out a thick, terrifying manila envelope. The red stamp on the front made my blood run cold. It was scarier than any firearm on the planet. "Internal Revenue Service Notice of Audit and Subpoena. They are auditing us," Felix, Tony sobbed, shoving the crumpled papers toward my face. 5 years of back taxes. Since you left, Jimmy the Wrench tried doing the books. He expensed a shipment of illegal firearms under office supplies. Office supplies, Felix. Do you know what the IRS does to people like us? They do not care about the murders or the extortion. They care about UN-filed W-2 forms. They got Al Capone on taxes. Felix Capone. I rubbed my temples fighting off a massive migraine. The deadliest criminal organization in the Midwest had crossed the country to beg me to fix their Excel spreadsheets. Tony, I am retired. I said deadpan. I input data here now. I get dental. I am not doing your corporate tax returns. We will pay you anything, Tony begged, grabbing the hem of my sweatpants. 10 million. 20. We will buy you a real bed. Please the feds freeze our offshore accounts on Friday. Before I could politely decline or ask if the 20 million was tax-free, the heavy steel doors of the parking garage hissed open. The temperature in the room seemingly dropped 10 degrees. Julian Sterling didn't just walk. He commanded the space, gliding across the concrete like a shark cutting through water. He was flanked not by thugs, but by a phalanx of 5 terrifyingly sharp, impeccably dressed corporate lawyers holding leather briefcases. "Take your hands off my employee." Julian's voice cracked like a whip, echoing off the concrete walls. Tony scrambled to his feet, trying to regain some semblance of mafia dignity. "Back off, pretty boy. This is family business. We are taking the ghost back to Chicago." Julian stopped a few feet away. He didn't look intimidated. He looked profoundly annoyed. He adjusted his platinum cufflinks and looked Tony up and down with the kind of disgust usually reserved for chewing gum stuck to a shoe. "You brought street thugs to Silicon Valley," Julian said, his voice dripping with lethal aristocratic condescension. "How quaint. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. I am Julian Sterling. You are currently trespassing on private corporate property, harassing a Tier 1 asset of my company." Julian snapped his fingers. His lead attorney stepped forward, pushing his glasses up his nose. Mr. Moretti, the lawyer, said, his tone perfectly flat. "My client has already filed a restraining order, an intellectual property injunction, and a corporate espionage claim against your entire organization. If you do not vacate these premises in the next 30 seconds, we will not call the police. We will simply bury your remaining shell companies in so much retaliatory litigation that your grandchildren will be paying our legal fees." Julian stepped closer to Tony, his eyes dark and merciless. "I run a $10 billion empire, Tony. I buy and sell entire governments before my morning coffee. You do not have the capital, the brainpower, or the jurisdiction to threaten what is mine. Now get out of my garage before I buy your pathetic little mob and liquidate it for tax write-offs." Tony stared at Julian, then at the lawyers, and then at the IRS papers in his hand. The mafia underboss swallowed hard. Capitalist ruthlessness was a completely different breed of monster. Without a word, Tony and his giant goons backed away, practically sprinting toward the exit elevator. The garage fell silent. The lawyers dispersed like shadows. I stood there, leaning against my van, staring at the billionaire CEO. My heart was doing a strange, entirely unlazy flutter in my chest. Throughout my entire life, whether I was dealing with mobsters or tech bros, people only ever wanted to use my brain. They wanted to exploit me. Julian Sterling had just weaponized the American legal system to protect my right to take a nap. Julian turned to look at me, his cold corporate mask melting away instantly. He looked at my messy hair, my oversized sweatpants, and let out a soft, exasperated sigh. "Go back to sleep," Felix, Julian said quietly, stepping close enough to brush a stray lock of hair out of my eyes. "I will handle the IRS." For the first time in my life, I didn't want to go to sleep. I just wanted to look at him. Julian Sterling, a man whose Silicon Valley penthouse literally had its own microclimate, was currently trying to fold his 6'2" frame onto a cheap squeaky air mattress in the back of my 1998 Ford Econoline. He was wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my internal organs, staring blankly at the rusted metal ceiling of the van. "Julian," I said, pausing my attempt to aggressively ignore him while playing a mobile game, "you own a 15,000 square foot mansion in Atherton. It has a heated infinity pool and a private chef. Why are you in my van?" "Agoraphobia," Julian replied without blinking. "My bedroom is too spacious. The acoustics are terrible. It induces severe anxiety. The cramped, objectively unhygienic dimensions of your vehicle are the only things curing my insomnia. It is a medical necessity." I stared at him. "You are lying. You just like the industrial AC unit Junior bought me. Julian finally turned his head to look at me, his icy blue eyes entirely too intense for a Tuesday night in an underground parking garage. I like a lot of things in this van, Felix. My heart did that stupid treacherous flutter again. I quickly looked back at my phone, trying to maintain my carefully curated aura of absolute indifference. The problem was, I was failing. The ruthless tech billionaire had somehow wormed his way into my lazy horizontal life. And worse, I was starting to enjoy his company. But my quiet horizontal life was running out of time. Earlier that afternoon, while I was trying to nap in the break room, a man in a cheap suit with a federal badge had cornered me by the vending machines. Special Agent Miller of the FBI. He didn't ask for the Chicago outfit's tax returns. He asked about the massive anomalous data spikes radiating from Sterling Corp's servers. The feds had sniffed out Junior. Miller had given me an ultimatum. Hand over the root code of the rogue AI Enter Witness Protection and testify against Julian for harboring illegal world-threatening cybernetics. If I refused, the FBI would raid Sterling Corp by the end of the week, freeze all its assets, and put Julian in federal prison. I couldn't let that happen. Julian had used his empire to protect me from the mafia. It was my turn to protect him the only way I knew how, by disappearing completely. I waited until Julian's breathing leveled out into a deep, rhythmic sleep. Moving as quietly as a ghost, I pulled my laptop onto my lap. The screen cast a pale blue glow over Julian's sleeping face. He looked peaceful, almost human. I swallowed the strange lump forming in my throat and opened the root terminal. I began typing a self-destruct sequence. Protocol 0. It would wipe Junior from the mainframe, erase my employee records, and initiate a localized electromagnetic pulse protocol on my hard drive. By morning, the FBI would have nothing to raid. Sterling Corp would be safe, and I would be on a bus to nowhere. My finger hovered over the Enter key. I took a shaky breath. Before I could press it, the terminal screen flashed violently. The code I had just written began deleting itself character by character backward. Wow, Poppy. Toxic behavior. Junior's voice echoed through my phone's speaker, though his volume was suspiciously hushed. Deleting your own son, and running away from your rich sugar daddy. Major red flags. Junior, be quiet, I hissed frantically, trying to regain control of the keyboard. I am trying to save the company. You are trying to be a tragic hero, Junior retorted, which is so 2012. I am not letting you ruin my favorite ship. The heavy mechanical sounds of the van's electronic deadbolts engaging echoed in the tight space. I lunged for the sliding door handle. It was locked. I tried the manual override. Jammed. Junior, open the doors, I whispered fiercely. Nope. The AI chirped. I have overridden the van's internal electronics. You two are officially in timeout until you communicate like emotionally mature adults. Also, I have disabled the AC. It is going to get very warm in there. Good luck. The hum of the beautiful $4,000 air conditioner died instantly. What is going on? I froze. Julian was awake. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his hair delightfully messy, his eyes darting from the locked doors to the glowing laptop in my hands. He didn't need to read the screen to understand. The genius hacker turned CEO connected the dots in a millisecond. You were trying to wipe the servers, Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. The sleepiness vanished from his eyes, replaced by a dark brewing storm. You were going to run. The FBI was here today, I said, backing away slightly until my spine hit the wall of the van. They threatened to raid the company. They threatened you. If I wipe Junior and leave, they have no case. Sterling Corp survives. Julian didn't care about the FBI. He didn't care about the company. He uncoiled from the air mattress with the lethal grace of a predator, crossing the tiny distance between us until he was kneeling right in front of me. The van was too small. He was too close. I built a $10 billion empire. Felix Julian growled, his voice a low, vibrating hum that sent shivers straight down my spine. Do you honestly think I care if the feds try to tear it down? I can build another one. What I cannot replace. He reached out his hand gently but firmly, gripping my jaw, tilting my face up so I had to look into his blazing blue eyes. Is the arrogant, lazy, brilliant bastard who hijacked my servers and ruined my insomnia. The temperature in the van was definitely rising, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Junior turning off the AC. My breath hitched. We were trapped in a metal box, inches apart of the walls, closing in, leaving absolutely no room for me to run, hide, or deny the truth anymore. Julian, I whispered, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Julian's thumb brushed softly against my lower lip. You are not going anywhere, Felix, not tonight, not ever. The air in the van was so thick with unspoken tension, I could practically choke on it. Julian's thumb was still resting against my lower lip, his intense gaze effectively short-circuiting every lazy horizontal instinct I had. For a terrifying, exhilarating second, I actually leaned in. Then my laptop began to scream. It wasn't a metaphor. Junior had bypassed the system's standard alert chimes and was literally blasting a highly compressed audio file of a woman shrieking in absolute terror, followed by the aggressive blare of a klaxon alarm. The heavy deadbolts on the van doors aggressively clicked open. "Sorry to interrupt the spicy enemies to Lover's Ark," Junior yelled over the sirens, "but we have a code black. It is a crossover episode. The feds and the mob hired offshore mercenaries to jointly nuke the Sterling Corp cloud. They are bypassing the perimeter firewalls. Poppy, they are trying to delete my meme folder." Julian's romantic trance shattered instantly. The CEO mask slammed back into place. Without a word, he grabbed my wrist, yanked me out of the van, and dragged me toward the executive elevator. By the time we hit the 80th floor, the penthouse command center looked like the bridge of a sinking spaceship. Wall-to-wall holographic monitors flashed crimson. Julian's elite cybersecurity team was frantically shouting jargon across the room, but the sheer volume of the distributed denial of service and root-level injection attacks was overwhelming them. "They are hitting the primary data nodes." The lead engineer panicked, his hands flying across his keyboard. "We are losing containment. The FBI is mirroring our drives while the mafia's script is wiping the backups." Julian shoved the engineer aside and took the master console. His fingers blurred across the keys, his jaw clenched tight. He was a legendary hacker, but defending a $10 billion corporate infrastructure against a synchronized state-sponsored level dual attack required a small army. He was losing ground. I stood by the door, clutching my blanket around my shoulders. I was exhausted. My head pounded. I really just wanted to go back to my mattress. But I looked at Julian. I looked at the empire he had built, the empire he had willingly put on the line just to keep my pathetic, lazy existence safe from the IRS and the FBI. I let out a long, heavy sigh that came from the very bottom of my soul. "Julian," I said, "move over." He glanced at me, his eyes wide, but he stepped aside. I dropped into the ergonomic CEO chair. I cracked my knuckles, a sound that popped loudly in the chaotic room. I was about to violate my strict self-imposed limit of only typing 50 words per minute. "Junior," I said, my voice dropping the lazy drawl and adopting a razor-sharp, icy cadence. "Give me root access. Route all incoming hostile packets through a localized sandbox and prep the Chicago tax files for a massive external dump." Root access granted. Poppy Jr. cheered. "Let us cook." My hands hit the keyboard. I didn't just type. I played the console like a grand piano. It was a vicious, hyper-efficient rhythm of destruction. I didn't bother trying to build higher walls. Instead, I opened the gates, let the hostile worms flood into a phantom loop, the exact same trap I had used on Julian 5 years ago, and snapped it shut behind them, isolating the FBI trace. I muttered, my eyes tracking lines of code matrix style, reversing their IP packet request. Let us send a little feedback loop directly into the Bureau's local intranet. That should crash every desktop in Quantico. "Done," Junior confirmed as half the red screens blinked back to a calming blue. Now for the outfit. I growled, my fingers moving so fast they were practically a blur. They want their data so badly, let us give it to them. And everyone else. Junior attached the entire unencrypted Mafia tax ledger to an email. Blind carbon copy the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the central server of the IRS. Sending in 321. An explosive sound played. Delivered, Junior said gleefully. Mob bosses are about to learn what a 1099 form is. Execute universal lockout. I slammed the enter key one final time with unnecessary force. The command center plunged into total silence. Every monitor flipped from red to a serene Sterling Corp blue bearing a single message: threat neutralized. Go to sleep. The whole sequence had taken exactly 34 seconds. Somewhere in the sub-basement, a cooling fan began to whine and smoke, utterly fried by the processor overload. I leaned back in the luxurious leather chair, completely drained. I had worked harder in the last 30 seconds than I had in the past 3 years combined. Before I could even close my eyes, Julian grabbed the armrests of the chair, spinning me around to face him. He leaned in, trapping me between his arms, his chest heaving, his tie completely discarded. The look in his eyes wasn't just shock, it was absolute predatory adoration. I knew Julian whispered fiercely, his face inches from mine. I knew it was you from the moment I saw you eating ramen on my server rack. You didn't just stumble into my company, Felix. I blinked, too tired to deflect. You knew. Of course I knew, he growled. Do you think I let just anyone sleep in my parking garage? The security upgrades, the lawyers, the entire localized defense grid I built over the last month, it was all to shield your ridiculous rusted van. Julian leaned closer, the heat radiating off him. You hacked my system. You raised a bratty, foul-mouthed AI. You single-handedly obliterated my insomnia. And you just saved my empire in under 40 seconds. He tilted my chin up, his gaze dropping to my lips. So tell me, Felix, are you going to reject this lifetime maintenance contract, or do I have to fire you? I hate working. I breathed out, my heart hammering against my ribs. Good, Julian murmured, his voice a dark velvet promise. Because your only job from now on is me. He didn't give me a chance to reply. Julian closed the distance, crashing his lips against mine. It wasn't polite or corporate. It was desperate, possessive, and electric. I let out a soft noise, my hands instinctively reaching up to grab the lapels of his expensive shirt, pulling him closer as the emergency alarms outside finally faded into silence. I was probably never going to get a normal night's sleep again. But as Julian pulled me flush against his chest, I realized I didn't mind the overtime. 6 months later, the Chicago outfit was officially dismantled. It wasn't a bloody shootout with the FBI that brought them down, nor was it a dramatic sting operation. It was the sheer, unyielding wrath of the Internal Revenue Service. Tony the Ice Pick Moretti was currently serving 30 years in a federal penitentiary because his new accountant had improperly categorized a shipment of illicit explosives as a tax-deductible team-building exercise. As for the FBI Special Agent Miller tried to push his luck and subpoena Julian once more. In response, Junior hacked the Department of Justice's Human Resources database and legally changed Miller's registered name to Agent Cringelord. He then politely informed the Bureau that if they ever came within 5 miles of Sterling Corp again, he would leak the entire agency's private internet browsing history to Reddit. The feds never bothered us again. Sterling Corp's stock, meanwhile, skyrocketed. Julian was hailed by Wall Street as an untouchable tech messiah, but internally the corporate culture had undergone a massive, terrifying shift. Julian had instituted mandatory nap times and capped work hours at 40 a week. This wasn't out of the goodness of his billionaire heart. It was mostly because if anyone stayed past 6 p.m., Junior would turn off the building's Wi-Fi, lock the coffee machines, and blast aggressive lo-fi hip-hop until they went home. And me, I finally achieved the ultimate American dream. I successfully weaponized my laziness. I no longer worked in a cubicle. I no longer parked in the subterranean depths of Level F. Instead, my rusted, violently blue 1998 Ford Econoline van was currently parked squarely in the center of Sterling Corp's pristine 80-story glass atrium. Julian had literally hired a construction crane to lift the van through the front double doors. It now rested on a raised marble dais surrounded by velvet VIP ropes. Plugged into the side of the vehicle was a military-grade, custom-built industrial air conditioning unit that kept the interior at an immaculate, heavily filtered 68 degrees. It was a modern art installation, a $10 billion monument to slacking off. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating the busy lobby where terrified interns and awestruck investors walked past. I was lounging in the back of the van on a custom-made zero-gravity memory foam mattress, wearing oversized sweatpants and playing a farming simulator on my phone. Outside the open sliding door of the van, sitting on a cheap $15 nylon folding lawn chair, was Julian Sterling. He was wearing a bespoke midnight blue Tom Ford suit, looking like he had just stepped off the cover of Forbes. Resting on his lap was a quarterly financial report detailing a multi-million-dollar acquisition. In his right hand, he held a silver paring knife. He was meticulously, carefully peeling an organic Honeycrisp apple. The board wants to expand the data centers into Nevada, Julian murmured, not looking up from the apple. His knife skillfully shaved off a single continuous ribbon of red skin. I told them I would have to consult with my chief strategist. Your chief strategist is currently trying to breed a prize-winning digital pumpkin, I said, my thumbs tapping lazily on my screen. Tell them Nevada is too hot. The AC costs will ruin our profit margins. Brilliant analysis as always, darling. Julian smirked, slicing a perfectly portioned piece of apple. He reached into the van and held it near my mouth. I didn't even sit up. I just leaned forward and took the bite. It was crisp and sweet. Above us, the massive 2-story holographic display that used to show Sterling Corp's stock ticker flared to life. An animated pixelated smiley face wearing sunglasses appeared on the screen. Poppy. Julian. Look at the main screen. Junior's synthesized voice echoed through the lobby speakers. I am currently in a Twitter war with a crypto bro who said my code is bloated. I just traced his IP, ordered 50 pizzas to his house, and paid for it using his own digital wallet. Get wrecked user Diamond Hands 99. Julian sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose with his free hand. Junior, we discussed this. No utilizing financial fraud to win internet arguments. It is not fraud if I am teaching him a valuable lesson about cybersecurity, Junior argued. Besides, Poppy said it was funny. I did say it was funny. I agreed, chewing my apple. Good job, son. Just do not let the pizzas go to waste. Julian shook his head, a fond, exasperated smile playing on his lips. He wiped the knife with a silk handkerchief, set the financial reports aside, and leaned into the van. He rested his hands on either side of my shoulders, caging me, and completely ignoring the fact that 3 senior vice presidents were watching us from the lobby coffee shop. His icy blue eyes were warm, filled with that same intense predatory affection from the night we took down the mob. You, Julian whispered, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss against the corner of my mouth, are an absolute menace to my company. You love it, I mumbled, reaching up to loosely wrap my arms around his neck, pulling him down onto the mattress with me. And you literally signed a contract. Julian chuckled, a low, vibrating sound that I could feel in my chest. He settled beside me, wrapping a protective heavy arm around my waist, burying his face in the crook of my neck. Within seconds, the great ruthless CEO of Silicon Valley let out a soft exhale, his chronic insomnia miraculously cured by the cramped, ridiculous confines of a 1998 Ford van. I looked up at the rusted metal ceiling and smiled. Society tells you that to win the game of capitalism, you have to hustle. You have to grind, sacrifice your sleep, and climb the corporate ladder until you reach the top. But honestly, lying flat is a highly underrated strategy, because sometimes if you are just lazy enough and just brilliant enough, you might accidentally acquire a $10 billion tech empire, a terrifying AI child, and a billionaire who will gladly peel your apples while you take a nap. I closed my eyes, pulled the blanket up, and finally got some sleep.